Hello, everyone. It's great to see all of you. I am Dave Meckelberg. I am the Chief of Staff at Wade and Wendy and one of the organizers of the conference. I will be one of your guides throughout the day to help point you in the right direction for navigating what is going to be a really, really special day. I am so excited to be here, to be with all of you. There's so much happening in the world, and it is wonderful to be together with people who are committed to solving some of the biggest human problems out there: systemic bias, mass unemployment, and just being there for other people. I'm so happy that you took time out of this moment to be with us today. And I can't wait for this important, timely conversation to get started. Just a word of warning, everyone is at home, so you might meet my dog later, you might meet my 4-month-old son. Expect to get a little bit of life in this, which is really exciting. But with that, it is my honor to introduce Gerry Crispin, the founder of CareerXroads, who will be picking up the conversation from here. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. And Dave is about to leave so he can put our last panelist on, but I'm going to give each of the panelists about 30 seconds to just say hi and who they are. And obviously, many of you who are from home, you've got all the ability to do some research, and if you're in TA or HR, you should be able to research any one of these panelists. But there's an extraordinary group, and we really want to address some of the issues that we see around us today and see whether or not we believe that tech is going to step up to be able to help us do what we need to do. So I'll start with Danielle.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everybody. Danielle Monaghan, and I lead our talent acquisition and global mobility function at Uber. Really excited to be here and looking forward to the panel today.
Cool. Michael?
Hi, yeah, Michael Glenn. Glad to be here. I'm with Cognizant, and I handle a lot of our transformation and delivery, especially around talent intelligence, recruitment marketing, sourcing, and training.
Cool. And Torin?
Now, you would think with Black Lives Matter, and I would have been the first one to go. But Danielle, you were actually a great person, so that's all right. I love it. Gerry, absolutely appreciate you. Torin Ellis, diversity strategist, risk mitigator, co-host of Crazy and the King podcast, and the host of Career Mix on SiriusXM. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And we got Jason Roberts back, which was exciting over there. So, Jason, how about you?
Well, hello, everybody. Jason Roberts here, and I work for Accenture. I'm responsible for our talent acquisition capability here, and I'm excited for this conversation.
I am too. The fact is we all have crystal balls. Everybody in the room does. And the only issue is whether we believe our crystal balls are going to actually predict something that comes true. I know mine are constantly broken because I always predict the world that I want to live in part because I'd love to be able to influence the movement that direction. But the reality is we're in the midst of probably one of the most extreme black swan events that we've seen in a long time, and a lot of people a lot of companies are depending upon many of us within those companies to make determinations as to what it might look like on the other side, and to step up around that because it changes the environment that the people work in, the candidates that we're looking for, and the world around us that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So. Without further ado, what I'd like to do is just start with something a little bit simpler. We obviously are seeing, from a communications point of view, an extraordinary shift in terms of our use of video. In fact, we're having Zoom fatigue in many instances, and the reality of how much video now dominates every aspect of what we're doing working from home. So those two issues are very real at the moment. The question is, will they sustain themselves, and what might we also need in terms of what we're going to do about that downstream? And I'll start with Jason this time.
Hey, Gerry. I'm struggling a little bit on audio, so start with somebody else, and I'm going to circle back to you.
Not a problem. I'm going to start with Michael then.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah, I think with video definitely is going to be sort of the norm because obviously with where we are right now, you're not going to be able to do as much in-person interviews. So you're going to have to leverage a lot of platforms that allow for, video interview, but more integrated, right? So that integration is going to come at a cost, and it's going to come at a learning curve, and it's going to come in and an adoption as well. So where we are right now, we've got a I would say a challenge because we're kind of there already. It's just embracing how we need to address some of this, right? We talk about video, and I'll say real quickly, our CRM. We have a lot of networks that we're building out. So we may even focus in the future how we can embrace video to do a lot of our outreach, just through video messages. But in terms of like onboarding and interviewing and stuff like that, we'll definitely have to use a lot more video technology.
There's an awful lot, but is there a lot missing from a technology point of view? Jason, we're talking about the video side of things. Can you still hear us?
I can.
Good.
Yeah, it's funny when this all happened. I reached out to a friend of mine who is a CEO for one of the big video providers, and I said, "What are you seeing in this space?" And what he said was that there were some companies who were ready, right? So some companies had sort of this implemented video screening, video capability, and if you had your hire view and your modern hire built in, ready to go. It was a flip of a switch, and it was a quick pivot. All the other companies have sort of these short-term solutions that they've thrown into place where they're using Zoom or Teams or Google Meets or something like that in order to complete their interview stuff. So they sort of pivoted really quickly. But the big question in my mind is how many of those are going to shift to sort of the more long-term sort of systemic models that have kind of talent acquisition specific technologies that tie into your systems and let you track responses to questions and all those things. So it's been an interesting piece to watch during this time.
I think it is going to be some interesting pieces to this, especially if we're talking about making selection decisions from this kind of engagement. If we were, for example, a panel and you were one of the candidates, then there's 3 or 4 of us talking to you in a variety, in literally in your face, you in our face. And my question is, what are the tools surrounding that allow for me to kind of engage you in a way that you're comfortable with, get the information that I need in order to make choices, and literally have technology be able to help me figure out whether or not I'm reacting to you in an inappropriate way, and whether or not you're reacting in an inappropriate way. I just think it's kind of fascinating from that point of view. Torin?
Did this thing happen where there were people who were doing early video interview stuff, right? And it was very strange. Like some people were very comfortable up front. Like my daughter my youngest is 15, and it dawned on us at one point that she was doing video calls because she would get hand-me-down iPhones and be able to do FaceTime before she actually had phone service. Yep. So a video call was more natural to her than a telephone call, right? So there are some that even when video interviewing came in were very natural and it worked fine. There were others who were super uncomfortable, and their discomfort actually was a little bit endearing, right? They would get embarrassed and say funny things, and there didn't seem to be a wrong way to do it at the time. And I'm also wondering if that maintains. I think people are pretty forgiving of video, especially right now. I think people are very forgiving of.
They are.
They are. I have the electrician here.
But at the same time, Jason, I got to tell you that I hear an awful lot of discussion about whether hiring managers, in fact, are comfortable making that final decision from a set of candidates that they've only seen that way. So that's kind of interesting from my point of view.
So,
Danielle?
Yeah, no, I'd just like to share a little bit from my experience at Uber. We actually had embraced Zoom technology quite early on and conducted a lot of our interviews via Zoom typically had folks come in maybe for the final round or at some point. So it was not difficult for us to flip the switch and do it all via Zoom.
And now it's 100%, right, Danielle?
100%, and we're making hiring decisions. And there's some real advantages. Our process from interview to off, everything is sped up significantly, so we can move a lot faster. And our hiring managers seem relatively comfortable, depending on the role, and it seems to be probably the more senior roles that people actually really want to meet folks in person, and the candidates want to meet folks in person. But the rest of our roles not. Where we still have some challenges in terms of technology is we hire a lot of technologists, and so you're doing whiteboarding and coding tests in the interview, and that technology hasn't fully caught up yet. People are working on it, and there's good technology in the market, but not exactly what we need yet. So for us, that's still a bit of a challenge.
I would also want to be able to search the content of what we spoke about to get to a point in the interview where I could then share that video with someone if I was doing a screening, for example. I don't want to share the entire piece of that. I may want to share the key pieces. And so I think there's just a whole set of tools that seems to me it would be kind of cool to have. Torin, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm going to take everything that everyone said because it's all been great contribution, but I'm going to come in from a different direction. And so I think about technologies like Quibi. Right now, we have so many individuals who are in their home right now spending so much time on apps like Hulu and Netflix. And Quibi really thought, Q-U-I-B-I, they thought that they would have grown significantly, especially during this time right now. And unfortunately, they haven't. The reason I share that story is not because their technology is not good, but for some reason, their messaging, their adoption, something has missed in terms of how they hit the market during COVID-19. And the way that we talk about video right now is, in my opinion, it's a bit dinosaurish. Like Danielle said, she's been rocking and Uber's been rocking Zoom for a very long period of time. I think if we are looking at, and we're honest with that phrase, future of work, I think people are going to demand something more than a Zoom meeting. I think people are going to want to have an initial conversation, and I'll use Danielle as an example. An initial conversation with Danielle, I may want to take 30 or 40 seconds in that same video engagement and get a peek behind the scenes at Uber. Then my next conversation might be with you, Gerry, and then another 30 or 40 seconds. It may take me deeper into Uber's experience. I think people want, if we are going to continue to do video interviewing in the very close future, I think people are going to expect more from the experience. They're just not going to do a Zoom meeting and think that's going to suffice.
I think you're right, because it's so one-dimensional, right? And you're saying, give me two-dimensional, give me three-dimensional. And how do we do that?
Absolutely.
That's spot on.
Yeah. And I think some of the assessment tools that surround some of the video work that's been done and some of the things that are out there are going to have to step up as well in terms of being able to demonstrate that they enhance your ability to make a better selection or not.
Well, to that point, Gerry, and I point down to Jason, when he uses the example of his daughter, this generation is just going to expect, and I don't want to say it in a negative way, but they expected, or they are accustomed to something that we're not necessarily accustomed to. And so I just think from an employer branding and attraction standpoint, we're going to have to offer them something different that's going to get their attention, to make them say, okay, I'll go on so-and-so's job board, or I'll apply for so-and-so's job via whatever, because the experience is engaging enough, it's enriching enough, it keeps my attention and says, you know what, that's the kind of employer that I want to be associated with.
All right, I want to switch a little bit.
Authenticity.
I think I want to switch a little bit, Jason, just because we got issues that we want to deal with. I think there's probably a number of sessions during the course of the day that'll go a little bit deeper in some of these areas. And I thought if we do a little bit of a broad brush on a few of them, we give somebody a chance to look at it a little bit deeper or ask a few heavier questions. Another piece to this is that working from home. And what's counterintuitive is, I'm lonely at home if I've not done this before. I've been doing this for a long, long time, so I'm just fine. But the fact of the matter is, anybody who's new at this is struggling a little bit with just what that's about. And I see more and more team leaders recognizing that. And when they're talking to their teams, are talking about their emotional, mental, physical, well-being before they even get to the work. And my point around that is we potentially are pivoting from just having a network to trying to build more of a community of the people that we work with the understanding that perhaps that community sense might increase engagement and performance of our companies. And people are saying they want to belong. They want to be part of a broader brush, if you will, community. And I think that's partly because we're kind of isolated. Do you think that as we come out of this, more employers are going to have more agility, more flexibility as it relates to where I work, when I work, how I work, from home, et cetera?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly
We're already seeing it, right? The big tech companies are doing this now.
Certainly in the technology industry.
They are all doing it, but are they fully cognizant of how vastly nuanced all of that is, and whether or not you're going to need some technology from a workforce planning point of view just to make sure you got coverage? If I give people opportunity to work anytime they want, anywhere they want, you're talking about asynchronous conversations. You're talking about potentially lack of coverage for customers. All of that can be fixed, but not without some kind of sophistication in terms of being able to deal with that.
I think some are confused on this one, right? So it's there's a couple of things you need. You need the technology and infrastructure to make it happen, but then you need the internal practices and behaviors to make it a enjoyable work environment. So my company happens to be a largely virtual company and has been for a very, very long time. And when this first started, our CEO said that customers have been coming to her and saying, I don't see how you can run a company virtually. Before this started, they would say, I don't see how you can run a company of that size virtually. And now they're saying, no, how exactly do I run a company of this size virtually? They're coming to her for advice, and it's completely flipped. And I think that that people have to change and be very cognizant and thoughtful. Like Drew mentioned, like the cribs sort of thing that he did with his team earlier, where they all showed each other their houses and built the team in that way and felt like they were able to get to know each other in a deeper and more meaningful way. And Gerry, you're at the beginning of this thing, the first 2 weeks, I joined every Zoom hangout I could, right? I went to yours, and a bunch of other people from the industry were putting those together just to build that sense of community. And I think that companies have to layer in that it's not just the tech, because I think the tech is there. It's foundational a lot of times, but it's that set of behaviors and that thoughtfulness of what do I do to make this feel like it's growing a team instead of a bunch of people who are working on stuff.
So it's more practice of how to use the tools to really lead in a different way. And that changes structure, leadership, a variety of different things that need to be trained, if you will, in some instances. Any other thoughts?
I would actually say that it's all of the above, but I think companies' cultures will have to evolve to be successful. We're not all going back anytime soon, for sure. And we learn every day. We've never done this before. We learn every day. But I think to be successful, your culture will have to evolve. And it is going to be around technology. It is going to be around building community. And I think this community piece is one of the very strong pieces that will come out of COVID. And then it is around accountability. You mentioned, how do you make sure people are doing what they need to be doing? How do you not have asynchronous communications? You have to build a really strong culture of accountability and performance management around what expectations are, and then let adults be adults and either deliver or not. But culture shift will be big.
That's an important point, but fairness may come into play, and an unintended consequence. If you let me work from wherever I want, I might be working in the suburbs of a city that, has a very high cost. I made a lot of money because I went into that city. I'm now in the suburbs. You didn't change my salary, my compensation. But now I decide, well, I can live wherever I want. I've always wanted to live in India. So I'm going to go to India. I'm going to do the job that I've been doing. And oh, by the way, there's somebody in India doing the same job I'm doing. I wonder if he or she is getting the same compensation I'm getting. Probably not. And so it raises the issue of whether or not we've overdone this competitive market pricing for jobs rather than what is the value of a job from the point of view of the person doing it, so that he or she believes there's equity in terms of how they operate.
I might say something to that. Consulting companies a lot of times have a cost of living adjustment. So maybe that's something that we'll look at in the future. If you're having completely virtual teams, and let's say I'm in Atlanta and I moved to, Alabama or something, where, a small town, or I don't know. So my cost of living adjustment might change.
Right.
To go back to what everybody was saying as well earlier, I just want to point out something too. A good adoption of how we are right now working virtual, and for the rest of the companies that may follow suit, it does require a lot of discipline and training, and that's what I'm learning now, because a lot of people, like my wife, she's virtual, and she's been in the office for like 20 plus years, so she's learning a lot of things that I had to learn when I first started. And there wasn't a lot of material back then. And I think now we have a lot more resources to help us stay more connected, more organized, more disciplined, and working virtual. But I do believe we'll probably get to a point where we're looking at, if you were going to be mobile and move somewhere, I do believe that we'll have some place, something in there like a cost of living adjustment that will factor in.
Got it.
I mean, it was that way with Twitter. I believe it was Twitter. It was either Twitter or Facebook, and they made the announcement that they would allow people to work from home, period, going forward. But they also had the addendum to that if, in fact, you moved away from San Francisco, there may be an adjustment in the way that we compensate you. And so it does raise the question that you put forth, Gerry. Did we value work based on the work being done, or did we value it simply because of the zip code that the organization was in?
My observation is we don't tell employees when they start about that kind of thing. We don't, it's not part of the training. So if you're going to be an expat, you suddenly learn a whole bunch of things around that point of view. The things that you might get as an expat that you won't get when you come back. But your expectations in working in New York City or in another hub of a major firm, they just say this is going to be your compensation, not that this is the amount that's based upon where you're working. And so there's going to be some interesting sets of issues as we open up our ability to work anywhere, from anywhere, in terms of how we react to that. So I just think there's changes that are going to have to take place. And I do think that technology has the ability to help us understand those differences in a way that we can then defend them when we change our policies to relate to that. So I think that's going to be a key issue. Let me switch to, there's a session going on while we're talking on automation, but before COVID, that was one of the number one things that most TA and HR folks talked about investing in 2020 was automation. Do you think that our experience of the last couple of months enhances the leaders in our organization wanting to move towards more automation, particularly in work areas like recruiting, for example?
So when I joined Uber about just under a year and a half ago, we went through sort of an envisioning exercise around how we want to look as a talent acquisition function and what our mission is, and sort of our vision is that we ignite opportunity by delivering global diverse talent on demand, enabled by high tech and high touch. And so we've gone down this journey, and we are revisiting that again to see, does that mission still really hold water? Is it still powerful? Is it still what we want to do? And not only is it still the right thing to do, we are accelerating the high tech part of the division. So for us, I think we've seen great opportunities to automate and then free up our recruiters to give really, really high touch treatment.
Cool.
Yeah, I absolutely. I feel like, people do the best job of hiring people. I recognize where the automation or technology plays a role in such. I think about what Apple said. You can look on Apple Insider, and they have a story out right now that says what they really learned from automation is that it can't beat, human skill. And so I feel like appropriately, inserted into the process, inserted into the stack, technology absolutely plays a role in it. But what I caution employers not to do is to over automate, where we tend to, rub out some of the genuineness in the process that only comes through an incredible conversation between Torin and Michael or Torin and Jason. That incredible insight that Danielle may have because she's heard something that the computer is not necessarily accustomed to hearing. She knows how to operate and to decide on that in a far better way than the technology does. So I just don't want employers to over automate because it's sexy, because it's newest thing on the market, or some other reason.
And if automation continues to be at the forefront of our thinking, it's a message to every recruiter or every person working in every job to spend a little bit of their own time thinking about what they're going to have to do and not waiting for the employer to reskill them, because that might take a little bit longer than we want. The last question.
I was going to pile on to Torin's thing real quick.
Yeah.
So Torin, I agree with you. I think that this is a human plus machine solution. So it's we hear about automation, we automatically think self-driving car, and the thing will be in a fully automated thing. I think it's really more like autopilot on a plane, right? The automation that I'm seeing and the thing that looks reasonable to me is with autopilot, you need a pilot for takeoff, somebody to keep an eye on things while you're in flight, and then the pilot still lands a plane. And I think that's what's necessary for most roles. And even if you have a deeply automated process, you still need humans involved in the process. You need humans to organize it, to make sure nothing breaks, and to close. I haven't seen anything that's fully automated yet.
Well, Jason, that's a good segue to this last question, because I think we would be remiss if we didn't raise that issue, and that has to do with the degree to which technology enables us to be fairer in how we treat employees as well as candidates. And there's a question from Andrea Villa, for example, the panel that technology often isn't neutral, and the extent to which we explore either misuse of technology or how technology can help us with misuse of practices, I think is a key issue. And I'm struck by one particular fact, which is that only about 28% of the companies in the United States, of Fortune 500 companies, have actually done a calculation on gender disparity, racial disparity, et cetera, within their organization on any dimension, including pay. And yet most of those companies have very strong value propositions about diversity, inclusion, et cetera. But yet they lack the transparency to do that. And even the 28% that have done the calculation, only a handful, I can count them on my hand, have actually shared them publicly. And so there's an issue here where technology that could be helping us be more transparent and fully engaging our employees and candidates to understand how fair we are in what we do or not and what we're doing about it. I think we've got a ways to go. And how can we deal with that?
Yeah, so let me jump in real quick. You say diversity, and I automatically peak up, and I just think that in the legal space, that's called plausible deniability. And so, using your example, Gerry, I think these organizations have willfully ignored that aspect of data collection, because I don't want to go through and provide pay equality for women. I don't want to necessarily know that my leadership team is gender imbalanced or underrepresented in any particular way. I think plausible deniability has played a huge role in why we have only come so far as it relates to inclusion and representation.
Do you think employees and candidates recognize that and see the hypocrisy of it?
Yeah, I don't know if they recognize it the way that I'm saying it. We kind of see it, but you know, when you are on the side of the employee and you're looking for new work or you're looking to grow in your work, I think sometimes you can get a bit myopic with what it is that you are focused on, and we really don't see the bigger picture. I think it takes instances, you know, Danielle, please forgive me when I say this, but I think it takes those bigger instances when a person inside the organization says, you know what, I don't like what I'm seeing here. It takes an example like a Nike a couple of years ago when the women signed the petition and they dropped it on the CEO's desk. I don't like what I'm seeing here. And so once we get outside of our individual situation and we can coalesce with other individuals, then we begin to see what the larger picture is. And I think we will continue to see more of that with this particular generation. And when I say this generation, us, you know, Danielle and I were both going into new organizations. We have the insight. We know a lot more now. We ask different questions. And so it's not just the younger folks. I think more people are going to expect more from their employer.
Interesting. Other thoughts? I mean,
well, from a technology perspective, there's a bias test testing effort that has to be done on any of the technologies we put out, right? So if you're rolling out the technologies without some level of bias testing, then there's a challenge with that. We have a technology that I've rolled out a couple of different times. It's been through bias testing for those companies. When we put it through our bias testing, it struggled. It struggled just a bit. And what we found out was, and this is why it's so challenging, honestly, as a practice, the test cases that were given in and of themselves tended toward bias. There was misrepresentation in the test cases that were delivered as a part of the test. So I think having really smart, well-informed people doing the bias test and helping to select the technology so that you feel as buttoned up as you can possibly be, you know, only allowing sort of white box algorithms. If a machine is making a decision and nobody knows why they made that decision, it's probably a problem. So those sorts of things can help solve that problem.
I appreciate this conversation. I got to tell you, we could probably go another hour, but we're done. I do believe there's a huge gap here, and this bias testing. For example, there's about 250 companies participating with the Gender Equality Index, but we need a lot more of those kinds of indexes that help us better look in the mirror. And then obviously, once you do look in the mirror, it's hard to turn away without doing something. I go back to what Torin said. If you fail to look in the mirror to begin with, if you fail to do the calculations that data will help you do, then you can ignore what's right there until it comes and bites you. And I think that
I just want to add here, there's also a huge bias test gap between human bias as well. It's not just technology.
Yep.
And it's almost easier to find and identify with technology.
Right. I mean, I agree. I think the technology can learn to help us deal with doing a better job of looking at ourselves. But we're going to have to do it, I think. And on that note, thank you all.
Bye.
And I don't know what we do to leave, to be honest with you. But I think Dave is going to tell us, because Michael gave up his spot.
Exactly. Hey, that was, I think I speak for every attendee here when I say that was wonderful. I mean, the exact conversation I hoped we'd have to kind of kick things off here. So thank you, Michael, Danielle, Gerry, Jason, Torin. This was fantastic. As far as what's next, there are so many great talks happening throughout the day, both on the main stage here and on the session stage. So be sure to check out the schedule. If you click on reception, you can see what's happening. Right now, we are starting our networking 30 minutes. So it is highlighted now on the left-hand navigation. There's a little networking handshake button. If you click there, you can automatically be paired with another attendee from the conference. We liken this to sitting next to a stranger at the lunch table. It's sort of like chat roulette, but it's a chance to really build a community. We really want everyone to be together, just seeing the conversations that are happening in the chat. It's really wonderful and heartwarming. So chance to meet other folks, and we will pick up back here around 1 p.m. So check the schedule, go explore, and we will see you all out there in the conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.